So if we look at how we can develop on this now, then we create a sort of action plan or development plan for the performer based off of their weaknesses. So their first weakness that I'd like to focus on is their shooting. If I look specifically at 2-pointers first, because that's a closer range, then we can develop to those 3-pointers. So the intended improvements that I'd like to make is that obviously they have more shots scored in the game, because their scored to miss ratio was very poor. So how we can go about this is creating a circuit of shooting drills for them to complete. So this will consist of 3 drills. They will be progressive to ensure that they're not thrown into the deep end and struggling with the first thing and unable to move on to the next. This will be focusing on obviously improving the more technical side of their shooting. So yes, the outcome is statistical and more numerical, but we're focusing on the technique of their shooting and getting that perfected. So if we look at the first drill I'd like them to do, then this is actually a very basic drill, but it really does help with that technique. So it's a simple drill to ease into the more advanced ones later on, allowing for that progression. So what we want here is for this ball to follow this pathway here. So you want the performer to throw the ball. They want to be standing quite close to a wall, and you want to have a mark set out, whether you paint that on or if it's a piece of paper stuck on the wall or tape spread into an X, but you want to make a mark on the wall about the sort of height of a net. And you want that performer to throw the ball up above them so that it goes above the height of the mark on the wall before it lands on this mark. So you do want it to land on this mark here, but you want it to go above this mark first, so it kind of loops in, almost replicating that kind of looping effect of it landing straight through and into the basket in a game situation. So the duration of this drill then, so I'd like the performer to repeat this process until they hit this mark 10 times in a row. So it's not how many times they throw the ball, it's how many times they are hitting that mark, so that it's creating that consistency in their technique. So the reason I want to focus on this, and I want them to do this drill with this basic technique first, is that they obviously had a lot of failed shots when we were looking at that analysis from that game. They had a lot of failed shots, so you can assume from that their basic technique was wrong from the start. So you want to improve on that initial basic technique for shooting, and this obviously focuses on that. So this second drill then, so this is a bit more game situated, as it's shooting from different points actually on the court, and you're actually physically shooting into the basket this time. So if you look at these red marks here, this is the point that the performer will be shooting from. So it's pretty simple. The performer will shoot from each point on the court, and they will do one shot from each point and then start again. So they'll do this 3 times overall. So they'll do one shot here, 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 come back to the start, here, 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 and one last time from the start. So the performance weakness was obviously both 3-pointers and 2-pointers. So we're trying to vary the distance and the angle here, which should improve both those types of shooting simultaneously. Looking at that last drill then, so this is a bit more advanced and actually has a bit of pressure on the performer. Again, even more game situated than the previous. So the performer here, your performer is going to be here, and you'll have another, or perhaps you even, a coach here. So the performer, being an attacker, would pass into the defender, and the defender passes the ball back. This would be a chest pass. And then once the defender's passed that ball back, you have that instant start of a one-on-one attack versus defence. You can see here there's this pathway for the attacker to run round. Now they don't have to follow that, that's just a potential. So the attacker can actually either shoot straight away from when they receive that ball, or they can try and dribble past the defender and get closer to the basket before shooting. This is because the performer will not be unmarked in a game, like the 2 previous drills were unmarked. This won't be. This makes it more game situated and will improve the performer's performance under pressure. Because we obviously did that video analysis of the player, that performer would probably felt a lot of pressure knowing that they were being recorded, knowing that every mistake they made would be on film. So that obviously could be a factor influencing their performance and their lack of shots scored. So this defender here applies that pressure and makes them more used to it, and so they can adjust to it. So if we look at the second weakness and the third weakness, they actually relate in the sense that they're both to do with power. So the second weakness we took from the technical model, and that was that the performer wasn't jumping high enough. And the third weakness was obviously their propulsive impulse that we took from the numerical data. Now propulsive impulse is obviously to do with power, and jumping, that vertical jump, is obviously also to do with power. So we can link these 2 weaknesses together and actually create an action plan that combines the 2 weaknesses and focusing on that improvement on power. So obviously we want to improve a higher jump and we want to increase that propulsive impulse. So I'll set a general just target for the performer. I'd like them to actually increase their height by 10 centimetres, and we'll see how we measure that later on. And I'd also like them to increase their propulsive impulse by 3 newtons per second. And how we're going to do this is actually by using a plyometric training. So plyometrics actually focus on specifically jumping and leaping and bounding. So that will obviously improve the power in the performer's legs. So improvements in power will obviously increase the initial propulsive force when the performer begins their sprint. And this improvement in power and propulsive impulse will mean that there are improvements in the performer's acceleration, which we acknowledged as a weakness. And this is because the performer is moving from resting to driving forward quickly. This improved acceleration will improve the player's performance as they can run the length of the court quicker to counter-attack or beat an opponent to the ball. The improvement in power will also obviously increase the height of the performer's jumps, meaning the performer is more likely to beat the opponent to the ball in the execution phase of a defensive rebound. If we look at plyometrics then, so obviously we always want to do a warm-up before we do the plyometric training. We don't want to get injured. So this warm-up will probably consist of a light jog to increase the heart rate, blood flow and body temperature, stretching to increase joint flexibility and stretch the muscles and allow easier body movement. So I'd like the performer to do swinging leg raises front to back and side, and also do arm and hip circles, open and close the gate, walking lunges. So this would be perhaps across the court, back and forth. All of these stretches are dynamic stretches. I'd also like them to practice some actions from the activity, so maybe just do a range of jumps, hops, leaps and bounds to warm up specific parts of the body that will be used in the plyometric training. So the plyometric training, I'd like you to do 3 sets per exercise. So each exercise movement will be anaerobic, 80% of their maximum heart rate, and they'll have 2 minutes rest between sets. Now when I say per exercise, I don't mean do 3 sets as in single leg hops, a set of that and then stop, and then do another set and stop, and do another set and stop. I mean go through the whole list, which I will explain, and then stop and rest for 2 minutes, and then do the next set of running through each of those exercises again. So the exercises I'd like them to do single leg hops on alternating legs, so 3 sets of 10, reps per leg. This is consistent throughout, so 3 sets of 10 reps per exercise. So I'd like them to also do depth jumps, so 2 leg take off for that. Obstacle jumps, again I'd like them to do a 2 leg take off. Box jumps, again a 2 leg take off. And tuck jumps and split jumps. So this should take between 40 to 45 minutes as a whole, the whole 3 sets. Now if we're applying the fit principle to this, of frequency, intensity, time and type, so how frequently they'll do it. So gradually, after 2 weeks, I'd like them to increase the frequency to training 3 times a week. So initially you can see here that they were just training 2 times a week. I'd obviously like them to train 3 times a week after 2 weeks, at a training session on a Sunday. Then after another 2 weeks, I'd like them to train 4 times a week by adding a session on a Thursday. But you'll train with no less than 1 rest day, as you need rest to prevent exhaustion or injury. So if we look at intensity now then, you'll also gradually increase the intensity every 2 weeks, meaning increasing the number of reps by 10 and the sets by 1 every 2 weeks. So time then, by increasing the number of sets and reps, you'll obviously also increase the time and length of the training sessions to approximately an hour, which will help to make improvements. And finally type, so you should also try to change what order you do the exercises in, and might change what type of exercise you do for one of the exercises after 2 weeks to prevent tedium. Changing up the order will obviously mean that you're not doing the same thing in the same order every week, and it won't become boring. I suggest also doing another 20-meter sprint. This could be each week at the end of the week, or this could be every 2 weeks, along with when you make those additions to the sessions. But I suggest doing another 20-meter sprint to check if your acceleration has improved. So this would just be seeing your velocity in the first 5 meters, obviously. You also need to ensure that you're hydrating regularly throughout this session, because I don't want you to get dizzy or become dehydrated and feel the effects of that dehydration. So just to be clear, that's all of the exercises that I want you to do, and obviously that's the set there, that's how many sets, and that is how many reps, just to remind you. So I'd like you to test this every 2 weeks. So I'd like you to do a vertical jump test every 2 weeks. Like I said before, I'd also like you to do another 20-meter sprint every 2 weeks to see if your acceleration has improved in that first 5 meters. So you just need to stand still and reach up as high as you can. No jump, just reach and make a mark there, and then jump and reach as high as you can and mark off that and see the difference between the 2 heights. Now, obviously, as a biomechanist, I can only give you advice within biomechanics. I can't give you any dietary plans, but I would recommend seeking advice from a nutritionist on a diet to work alongside with this development plan. Obviously, this was the initial training for plyometrics, but you'd have those days added, like I said, every 2 weeks. And you could even incorporate the skill-based drills from the first weakness into this as well, just by having this on this same day. I would suggest keeping these rest days though to prevent injury. So when you're giving feedback to your performer, you need to consider that you want to be honest with them. If they don't take negative feedback properly, maybe use the sandwich method of positive, negative, positive to give them this feedback. You also want to take into account their experience level, the type of feedback you want to give them. So you might give them verbal or non-verbal feedback. Their age obviously is a big factor into the sort of language you use and what's appropriate to their level of knowledge. You want to make sure your feedback's specific to that individual and not to the whole group. You must keep confidentiality. That is a legal obligation as a coach to do that. You also, like I said before, your choice of language dependent on age, and the factors influencing performance. So like I said before, conditions of the weather maybe, or just things that can affect their performance on the day that might be different in other days.